everyone, and welcome to the next episode in What I've Learned So Far podcast. My name is Jennifer Knoedl, and I am here as your host. We are on chapter 2. We're going through the book Psycho Cybernetics, and we are on the chapter 2 that talks about discovering the success mechanism within you. So I'm going to read a little blurb. It says, in man, the goal to live means more than mere survival. For an animal to live, it simply means that certain physical needs must be met. Man has certain emotional and spiritual needs that animals do not have. Consequently, for man to live encompasses more than physical survival and procreation of the species. It requires certain emotional and spiritual satisfactions as well. I think this really speaks to so many of us needing a purpose. I know there was a time in my life that, well, I had actually struggled with depression quite a bit, but there was a time specifically in my life that I was really depressed and even got put on some medication. And now, as I look back on that, it's very obvious to me that I just didn't know what my purpose was. And of course, no one asked me that. They just gave me medications, but I think that's it. There's so many different ways that we've heard it. We have a God-shaped hole in our heart, it's God-shaped. So anything that we try to fill it up with just isn't going to fit. The only thing that fits is God. And we were created that way. We were created to worship. We were created to be fantastic creatures. I mean, even Jesus says, you'll do greater things than I've done, which I don't really understand that, but just even the idea that we could even be part of his story, I think is really amazing. So flipping over, it talks about how animals have a success instinct. So it talks about how squirrels, baby squirrel just already knows it's supposed to gather nuts, and birds know that it's time to fly south for the winter, even if it's their first winter. They have an internal, what this book is calling a success instinct. And we have a success instinct too. The word cybernetics, the title of the book, Psycho Cybernetics, it says the word cybernetics comes from a Greek word that means literally the steersman. So psycho, meaning your brain, and cybernetics, meaning the steersman, it is essentially telling us that we have a machine that we are able to use. We are not the machine. We have a machine. Get the difference there? He says this new concept, Psycho Cybernetics, is the principle of cybernetics as applied to the human brain, that man has a machine that he uses. So he goes on to explain how a torpedo works. And I'm sure some of you know better than me, but I didn't know this, and I thought it was really interesting. So essentially, a torpedo works by knowing what the target is and then adjusting as it goes along. So it goes towards the target. Something tells it it's not going, quite the right direction. Like you need to, steer a little bit this way. And if it should overcorrect, it corrects again. So it's really a process of small failures that gets it to the goal. And the concept is that we are like that also. I really liked that. It reminds me of the idea of failing forward. What else do they say? Fail fast, fail forward, fail fast. They talk about a baby, and I thought this was great because I could imagine it in my mind how when a baby, for instance, is reaching for something, it doesn't quite get it, right? It's like, it's reaching for this. It's like kind of grasping at something, its motor skills aren't, up to speed, what have you. But it finally figures it out, right? Babies finally figure out how to pick things up and how to bring things closer. And once we know things like that, we don't have to think about them anymore. They become habits. So it says the automatic mechanism that duplicates this successful response on future trials. It has learned how to respond successfully. It forgets its failures and repeats the successful action without any further conscious thought. This is a habit. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I think about specifically learning to drive a stick shift, but I mean, learning to drive a car, it's like that has become such a habit. And remember when you first started, I know maybe for people like me, it was a long time ago, but when you first started learning how to drive a car, it was just like stressful and there's so much going on and, you got to be looking around and, um, again, with the stick, it's like the shifting but then all of a sudden something clicks and you just figure it out, right? It's like riding a bike. You just kind of figure it out and then, you don't have any problems after that. I mean, maybe some of you start trying tricks and you fall off your bike, but the point is you don't have a difficult time just riding it because you've learned how to do it. And your success instinct has marked down that that's a successful way to go about getting what you want. And so we don't have to think about it anymore. Unfortunately, I think that happens also with a lot of our bad habits, right? They are unconscious and not all of them are steering us to success. See what else we have in here. He talked a little bit about computers, which I thought was really interesting because it almost is as if we have our mind is a computer that we have at our disposal. And, this book was written, gosh, I don't know when the first version of it is. I have a really old version. This one's newer, but it was before all the AI stuff. But, I know a lot of us we're getting concerned about what that means and is it going to take over? And I thought this section was comforting. It says, computer does not have a forebrain. Neither does it have an eye. It cannot pose problems to itself. It has no imagination and cannot set goals for itself. It cannot determine which goals are worthwhile and which are not. It has no emotions. It cannot feel. It works only on new data fed to it by its operator. By feedback data, it secures from its own sense organs and from information previously stored. So what I really like about that, it's one of the things that does separate us from a computer. And if you've worked with any Chat GPT, you can see that it's super helpful, but it's definitely not a human. He goes on to say, we have found that there is a capacity for acquiring knowledge that transcends the sensory function. I think of just a lot of the creators, old-timey creators, and they say it just came to them. It was just, something that was in the air. I don't know about you, but sometimes I watch Shark Tank. I'm like, man, I totally thought of that. It's like, a lot of times it seems like the ideas are just there for someone to take them or take them and make them better. We are living in a spiritual world, and to think that we're not really sells us short, really ends up selling our lives short. It says, in much the same way, when we set out to find a new idea or the answer to a problem, we must assume that the answer already exists somewhere, and we set out to find it. Was it Thomas Edison? I don't know if it was him, but I think it is. But it's essentially anything that the mind can conceive, you can achieve. Who would have thought we could fly in airplanes? Who would have thought, robots would be in people's homes? But all of this stuff is happening. Someone imagined it, and Elon Musk made it happen. So let me read you this section. If you really mean business, you have an intense desire, and you begin to think intensely about all the angles of the problem, your creative mechanism goes to work, and the scanner we spoke about earlier begins to scan back through stored information, or it gropes its way to an answer, much like the torpedo or the baby that we were talking about, where it's like you try, you fail, you readjust. It selects an idea here, a fact there, a series of former experiences, and relates them or ties them together into a meaningful whole that will fill out the uncompleted portion of your situation, complete your equation, or solve your problem. That is extremely encouraging because I think a lot of us, this life is full of problems or conflicts or challenges. And even though we seek out comfort so much, I don't think that's what we really want at the end of our life. Oh, that was comfortable. We want to overcome. We want to know our purpose. We want to be more. At least I do. This next section says, science has now confirmed what philosophers, mystics, and other intuitive people have long known. Every human being has been literally engineered for success by his creator, which is God. Every human being has access to a power greater than himself. I mean, as Christians, we believe that the Holy Spirit is within us, that, the power that parted the Red Sea, that raised Jesus from the dead, that performed incredible miracles, that, David killed Goliath with a slingshot. Like, what? So I'm encouraged because the Bible specifically is full of people that are just people. I mean, these aren't superhumans. And even, the successful people of our time that are still living right now, if you talk to them or, read their autobiography or listen to their podcast, it's really what we've overcome that gives us the wisdom that so many of us are seeking. So, in closing for this chapter, it talks about 4 concepts that it would behoove us to memorize because they will shed a lot of light on the remaining chapters. So I'm going to kind of give you some summaries here. So number 1 is that you have to have a goal or target. And the more specific, the better. It can't just be, I want to be rich. You actually have to know what that looks like, what that feels like, what you intend to do in exchange to get that money. And again, it's like, I don't know. Start thinking about it. Start ruminating. Start talking to yourself. Start asking your subconscious to start working on it. That's what this is saying. Number 2, it says, think in terms of the end results and the means whereby will often take care of itself. So this is interesting for us doers, for us fixitors. We're like, well, let me go muscle through it. Let me white knuckle it. Let me flex and do what I can do to make this thing happen. And, I think there's some validity to that. But also sometimes effort defeats itself, right? We're trying to do everything in the physical world, but it doesn't align with what's going on in our mental world. And so it doesn't work, which is it's kind of a difficult pill to swallow, I'll say, because again, would say I've been, I don't know if that's accurate, but very accustomed to how things work in the physical world. And, this being calm and asking yourself for solutions to problem, has not really been my style. I'm like, I'll figure it out. So number 3 is don't be afraid of making mistakes or of temporary failures because you need them. We don't know how to do everything the first time. And all of those little failures and correcting them, it's part of the process. I was hearing someone, I think it was David Goggins, talking about how not only does he, envision the goal, but it's like you also envision yourself getting up when it's cold outside and it's rainy and you don't want to run that day. I'm I'm not a huge runner, but I mean, I can understand the analogy, but you've already envisioned it in your mind. You've already prepared for that moment. So you're not just preparing for the when everything in your life is totally great. You're envisioning the kind of person that you have to be and the steps that you're going to need to take to get there. And you envision in your mind, and you're overcoming it. You're crushing it, right? If we're going to use the analogy about running, it's like you already know that it's going to be difficult. You already know sometimes you're going to be sore, and you're prepared for it. You're embracing that. Number 4 says, skill of any kind is accomplished by trial and error, mentally correcting aim after error until a successful motion, movement, or performance has been achieved. So that's what we're talking about, right? The torpedo, the correcting, you don't know how something's going to turn out until you just start. I mean, what is that? There's genius in just starting. I get it. It's like analysis paralysis is what I say that I have a lot. It's like, I mean, even with, whether it's this podcast or putting my ideas out there, it's like, do I know enough? Do I, maybe I shouldn't say this or that or whatever, but it's like, I could overthink it till the cows come home. But you really don't learn anything until you just start. And then you realize it's maybe not this huge monster that you've built up in your life. And next time how you could do it just a little bit better. And then every time you're doing it just a little bit better, eventually you reach your goal. He says you must let it work rather than make it work, which again goes back to, I want to make it work. I want to make it. I want to, even though it's not necessarily that it's just a new concept for me, but it is something that is difficult. And I don't think that we've definitely not been trained this way. School didn't teach us this, did not teach us how to control our minds or the power of it. And so, I can imagine that I'm not the only one, that it's a little bit of a rocky journey to let go and let God is one of the expressions that I really like. But there are so many quotes and quips that go along with this same philosophy because it's true. You do have to do the work, but you have to see yourself as someone different and know that it's going to be a process. And you may have little failures, but what do they say? It's not a failure if you learn something from it. And I believe that to be true. I mean, that's how I learn. I mean, I do. It's nice when I can learn things from books, but my experience has shown me that apparently I like learning through the school of hard knocks. I like to learn things the hard way, I guess. That is what the evidence of my life has shown. So that is pretty much the end of chapter 2. There's a quote by Emerson at the bottom that says, do the thing and you will have the power. So a lot of us want to wait until we're skinny enough, pretty enough, rich enough, knowledgeable enough, good enough, in whatever way that means to you. But it's a lie. It needs to be a process. We can't arrive there before we've seen it in our mind and we've done the work to get there. So the question that I'm going to leave you guys with at the end of this is, what experiences from your past prove out this concept? And I was thinking about, for a lot of you, sports. I mean, some of those, I tried flag football once. I jammed 2 fingers before I really wanted to go any further with that. But I got better. And just in the small amount of time that I was practicing. Parenting, I'm sure, right? I mean, what did they say? It's like you're the firstborn, parents are so controlling. And by the time, the younger children come around, it's like, do whatever. They've kind of figured it out. They know whatever tricks we're going to have, whatever tricks kids are going to have up their sleeves. I mean, I brought up driving. Oh, I remember thinking I was never going to learn how to drive a stick shift. And now, of course, I don't have a stick shift, but I'm pretty sure I haven't forgotten. I want to go drive one right now, actually, just thinking about it. Just all of that. I dig it. And I also put down dance because, I just remember, learning a new routine. I loved that. And it was like, oh man, my feet are supposed to be crossed on this beat. Let me try it again. Let me try it again. And then all of a sudden you finally get it and you're like, and you're like, yeah, I did it. I nailed it. Anyway, I'm excited. I'm excited to head over to chapter 3. So stick around for the next episode. The next episode is about your imagination, which is so godlike. It's very exciting. So, as I have started to say, I do not know everything. The more that I learn, the more that I realize I have so much to learn. But this is what I know so far. If you like this episode, or even if you just want to support me, you can like, share, comment, subscribe to this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.